It is a warmer day here in Florida, and it is in December, and I have a bunch of radishes that I need to harvest, and I think I want to ferment them. And so I want to show you how to ferment any sort of vegetables that you have, if anything that you want to ferment. So I think that's what I'm going to do today, and particularly with some radishes, because I have some that I need to harvest and get started on. So let's go. So radishes are one of my favorite vegetable crops to grow because some of the quicker maturing varieties can be ready to harvested in as little as 30 days. They're so low fuss and so easy to grow that it's so much fun to just plant them and watch little seeds prop up, and then before you know it, you have something to harvest and to show for your efforts. Now, there are a more winter type variety of radish that take a little bit longer to grow, so I do have those as well, and they're not quite ready yet. So I'm going to be harvesting, you're distracting me, harvesting some of my quicker maturing ones that are already ready, which are some of my French breakfast radishes, some cherry bells, just some different varieties that I had grown. So I'm going to go ahead and harvest those to use for our ferment today. All right, so let's get, this one's definitely ready. Wow, look at that. And this one. That might have a little hole in it. Harvesting root vegetables are one of my absolute favorite things to harvest because it's just so much fun. Look at the size of these. Some more little cherry variety. So something else that's important to know about radishes is that the greens are edible as well. They do have kind of like a prickly feel, but that kind of gets removed once you saute them. So you can saute them like other greens, or you can just give them to your chickens if you already have enough greens. So that's probably what I'm going to be doing today. Before I take them in, I'm probably going to cut these off and give them to my chickens, which will love me for that. Now you can see I have some that are over here that are starting to get ready, and they're the more wintering variety. This is a black Spanish radish, so they're starting to get there. I also have these little watermelon radishes, which I'm not sure if that's a winter variety, but they're not seeming quite big enough yet, so I'm gonna leave those in for sure. So this whole section will stay. And that is what I harvested. All right, let's get these radishes and go in. So fermenting vegetables is one of my absolute favorite ways to use my harvest and kind of preserve my food for a longer amount of time, because all it takes is salt, water, the vegetable to create a brine, and then the time just does all the work for you. You just let it sit. You don't need any fancy equipment. You don't need any sort of canning or anything like that, although there is more kind of equipment that you can get nowadays. They have weights to keep stuff submerged under the brine. There's sort of air releasing tops, but you don't really have to use those things. People have been fermenting vegetables for thousands of years before any of that stuff was invented, so you definitely don't have to have it. I don't use any sort of fancy equipment when I ferment. I just kind of use the basic what I have. So lacto-fermenting is basically using a salt brine to keep out any sort of bad bacteria that can't live in that environment, and letting the lactobacillus bacteria, which is the good bacteria on a vegetable, kind of take over because it can live in a salty environment. So the salt keeps the bad bacteria away and lets the good bacteria kind of take over. And then over time, that lactobacillus eats the sugar in the vegetable and converts it to lactic acid, which creates that kind of tangy dill pickle-like flavor. that you get. And so it's kind of like an old version of a dill pickle that doesn't use vinegar, that kind of creates a natural probiotic filled pickle. So I really love lacto fermenting and fermenting my vegetables. It's my preferred way to use my harvest, and I hope you like it and give it a try. So for this recipe, you're gonna need sea salt. You cannot use iodized salt. You're gonna make sure you need a good sea salt. You're gonna need your vegetable, water, a wide mouth mason jar, and I personally like to use some parchment paper for the top, just to keep it easier to unscrew my lid. Alternatively, if you don't want to use a lid and burp it, which is the method that I do, you can also use cheesecloth and a rubber band, and then that lets the air out naturally. So that part is kind of up to you. I choose to burp it, which I'll explain a little bit later. First, you will need to make sure to rinse off any dirt from your vegetables. Then you'll need to chop them up to put them in your mason jar. Some veggies, like beans, can be left whole. You will also need to add in any of your flavorings. I personally love the additions of garlic and fresh dill, but feel free to experiment with whatever herbs you have on hand. I also added in some coriander seeds. Then you will need 2 cups of hot water and dissolve 1 tablespoon of sea salt to make your brine. Next, you will place what is called a cabbage cap, which is just a cabbage leaf used to keep your veggies submerged under the brine, tucked in on top. Then pour your brine, completely covering the cabbage cap. Place a piece of parchment paper on top and screw your lid on tight. The only difference when working with cabbage is that you do not need water. You will put the sea salt directly on the cabbage, which helps to draw out the moisture from the cabbage itself. So you'll massage it and it'll create its own brine. You need 1 tablespoon of sea salt per every 2 pounds of cabbage. While I do love a plain sauerkraut, I also decided to add in some fresh ginger to this one. So during the process of fermenting, you do get an air buildup, which I like to use a top on my ferment so that nothing gets in and it stays nice and keeps any sort of bacteria out. However, because of that, I do need to go and burp all my ferments to releasing that air so you don't get any sort of shattered glass or unwanted things like that. So just make sure if you are using a top that you burp it, otherwise you can use the cheesecloth. So over here I have one already going of green beans. You can see it's already been fermenting. It's starting to get cloudy as the probiotics kind of take over. And to release any sort of bubbles and air, I just give it a little burp, and you could hear it. And then I just tighten it back and just kind of releases some of that air so that it doesn't explode. So I just want to say thank you for joining me today to harvest some radishes and learn how to ferment. I hope you really enjoyed it and that you give it a try, and I will see you all next week. Bye guys.